You're listening to localwebradio.fm.
Welcome to the Healthy Smiles Oral Health Show with Dr. Norm Ickert, brought to you by Ickert Dental Implant Centre, where they are committed to providing you with the very best in modern and advanced dentistry. Now, here's your host.
Hello, this is Nick Jaworski, and I am your host today. And of course, I am here with Dr. Norm Ickert, director of the Ickert Dental Implant Centre. And today we will be talking about missing teeth and the different options available for tooth replacement. Now, before Dr. Ickert joins us, just a reminder that if you have questions or require assistance, you can call Dr. Ickert's office at 604-881-1381. That's 604-881-1381. Dr. Ickert, welcome.
Thank you, Nick. Glad to be here.
All right. Now, last time we talked about what could lead to us missing or losing a tooth. And now we're going to talk about how to replace those teeth. And there's a bunch of ways, and I'm sure that modern dentistry has just a variety of ways to meet a variety of needs. And I guess let's just start at the beginning. It's a great place to start. If a person has a tooth or several teeth missing, how can they be replaced?
Well, again, it just depends on the individual circumstance, and there are obviously many different options. However, it must be said that today, dental implants are becoming the treatment of choice in most of these instances for several different reasons.
So, what are those reasons? How many do we have?
Well, the most significant reason why we choose dental implants is that the expected longevity is just so good. The strength is just excellent, and the stability that dental implant treatment offers is second to none. No matter what we've ever done in the past, nothing is as solid as an implant-supported restoration. So ultimately, the predictability as the result of the increased scientific knowledge and technology over the last 40, 50 years has made the outcome very predictable, something that we've never had before.
Well, that's amazing. Of course, we have more skilled technicians, of course, with better tools. And so just to be able to consistently put implants in mouths that are going to stay, that's encouraging. But are there any other options besides dental implants for replacing a missing tooth?
Yeah, if people still have, or the patient still has natural teeth on either side of the missing tooth, then, and if they're strong enough, then you could consider doing what we know as a fixed bridge, which means that you trim down these teeth to a certain degree, and then you fit this so-called crown abutment over the trimmed down tooth, and it will then support the missing tooth with these two anchors on either side. And that's been conventional dentistry for the last 40 or 50 years.
Oh, okay. I never really knew what a bridge was. That makes sense. Is there a downside to a fixed bridge?
As I mentioned, in order to put the bridge in place, you actually have to trim the tooth down to make enough room for the material of the so-called abutment that sits on top. So that means that this tooth gets traumatized from the drill, the heat builds up, and there is a risk of nerve damage. There's a risk of the tooth cracking. It just puts the natural tooth more at risk than if it was left totally untouched. And that is primarily the biggest risk when you actually do a bridge instead of a dental implant supported restoration.
Okay, well, that sounds like a real concern, of course, with putting a bridge in. But are there any other concerns that the patients should be aware of?
Yeah, but besides what I just mentioned of exposing the tooth to more trauma and risk of nerve damage, there actually is more of a physical sense. When teeth are joined together, they actually function differently than what they were intended to function. For example, each one of our teeth are like little joints, little ligaments, and they've got little stress breaker mechanisms in them so that when you chew something hard, they move just enough to not break, and they have this wonderful shock absorbing system built between the tooth and the bone. So each tooth is designed to operate and function on its own. So when you join them together, you do take away some of this shock absorbing property, and it makes the teeth more rigid. And if you have a more rigid system, then you end up with potentially more problems. And the way it usually manifests itself is that one of the teeth that the bridge is anchored to begins to lose its cement seal over time, and it can take years for that to happen. And as it loses its cement seal, bacteria creeps underneath, and the bridge is still retained by the one side, but loose on the other side. And oftentimes this leads to significant breakdown of the natural tooth and eventually the loss of the tooth. So if, for example, you have a 3-unit bridge to start off with, oftentimes you now lose 1 or 2 of the so-called anchor or abutment teeth, and now you're faced with a much bigger problem where there are more teeth missing, and that's exactly what we're trying to avoid with implant dentistry, because simply said, there is no dentistry better than no dentistry. In other words, the less we touch your teeth or touch the patient's teeth, the better off that patient's going to be.
Okay, well, we have to take a quick break, and I'm still here with Dr. Norm Ickert. And when we return, we'll be continuing our conversation on what options are available for when a person has 1 or more missing teeth. So we'll touch that in a second. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
More Healthy Smiles with Dr. Norm Ickert from Ickert Dental Implant Centre after this.
Take control of your financial future with sound investing with Byron Stryloff, Senior Investment Advisor and Chartered Financial Planner with over 30 years of experience on the Business Channel on localwebradio.fm.
Shopping for the lowest mortgage rate? Looking to refinance? Catch the Mortgage Newscast with Jared Dreyer on the Business Channel on localwebradio.fm. Buying or selling a home on the Semiahmoo Peninsula? Catch up on local market conditions on This Week in Real Estate with Lance and Connie Marples from Sutton West Coast Realty on localwebradio.fm. To schedule a face-to-face consultation, you can reach Lance and Connie at 604-538-8888. That's 604-538-8888. And visit them online at www.surreywhiterockhomes.com.
It's time now for more Healthy Smiles with Dr. Norm Ickert.
All right, we are back, and I'm still here with Dr. Norm Ickert from the Ickert Dental Implant Centre. Now, what options besides dental implants are available when there's 1 or 2 teeth missing, maybe even more?
Well, the conventional option that we all have had in the past is what's called a removable partial denture, if you still have some teeth. Mm-hmm. But if you're missing all your teeth, then you would have what's called a full denture. Now, a removable partial denture relies on support by the remaining teeth that are still present, and they're usually clasped with some kind of metal wire. And that is what keeps this partial denture in place. And of course, you can imagine as you chew and function that this clasping mechanism tends to rock these anchor teeth. And so oftentimes these can become quite uncomfortable for patients. Whereas a complete denture, which has no teeth in the mouth whatsoever, or at least in one arch, is supported by suction. So that the surface of the acrylic, which sits against the surface of the palate and then has a very minor layer of saliva in between, acts like suction, similar to 2 plates of glass with a little bit of moisture in between them. Now, that's the ideal world when there is suction. However, the anatomical variations in patients' palates is so significant because of the loss of teeth creates loss of bone that oftentimes there is a very poor palate for this suction to occur, and people will then have incredible problems with retention of their denture.
Now, this might be a basic question or the wrong question, but why should missing teeth be replaced at all? Why is that important?
Well, I think one of the most important reasons for replacing missing teeth is to maintain the bone. As we've talked about previously, when you lose a tooth, there is a complete genetic coating that takes place for the bone to be lost. In other words, if you don't use it, you lose it. If there's no force on the bone, if there's no loading, no stress, the bone begins to resorb away. By having dental implants in the jawbone, it continues to stimulate the jawbone and it minimizes or slows down this resorptive process. So I think to keep the bone structure in place, dental implants are extremely important. So ultimately, we want to maintain the physiology as best as we can. But then, of course, what we're really striving for is for patients to receive the proper function and, of course, the proper aesthetics. And that's why I believe tooth replacement is so important. Now, having said that, some teeth maybe don't need replacement. For example, if you have a second molar that breaks down or has broken down and you need to replace it, it may not necessarily be replaced because it's been proven that you can function, or an average patient can function extremely well with only 12 teeth instead of 14 teeth. And aesthetically, it's often not that much of an issue depending on the patient's smile line. So each case really has to be decided upon on its particular personal situation.
Now, that's interesting. You mentioned aesthetics, and how does bone loss lead to sort of an aesthetic compromise in terms of how does it look, how is that going to impact the rest of our teeth, and so on?
It's really fascinating, Nick, that when you lose a tooth, you get shrinkage. The bone shrinks both upwards and inwards. And you can imagine if that happens with one tooth, you can understand that there will be what we call a concavity or some type of dip in the bone. But now if you do this on multiple teeth, your entire jaw begins to creep upward and inward. And so you end up losing facial height, you lose lip support, and you begin to age incredibly quickly when you lose this underlying bone, which was there to support your teeth. So the changes are actually dramatic, and they continue to change when you put a denture on top of this shrinking bone. Now the forces of the bite continue to pound on the bone, which has no support of roots of teeth or of implants, and that shrinkage continues to the point where it just can become an eggshell for some patients. And it's extremely sad to watch this destruction.
That sounds not very pleasant. And are there any other consequences of missing teeth besides what we've already talked about today?
Well, one thing that is often overlooked and not talked about, but I think one of the major consequences, I believe, besides, well, let's just go back to one or two missing teeth, the adjacent teeth could drift in to that spot. So there could be some changes of the adjacent teeth or of the opposing teeth. But one thing that doesn't often get talked about is that there is an incredible emotional price to pay when teeth are missing, either in the front of the mouth for aesthetic reasons or when an entire group of teeth are missing, that it really affects a person's confidence, self-esteem. It affects their social activities. It has a huge, huge impact on our overall well-being. And if we go right back to our very first podcast where we talked about what is oral health, there is a true sense of mourning when patients are confronted with losing a tooth or a group of teeth or even all their teeth. It becomes a very difficult emotional issue to deal with and can oftentimes take a few years to actually overcome, because no matter what we do and how much a patient pays, at the end of the day, what we replace a tooth with is still a prosthesis.
Right.
So ultimately, if we can save a tooth, we will do that. But the next best option to saving a tooth would be to give the tooth the stability of an implant and the function and the aesthetics and mitigate the consequences of the loss of this tooth as much as possible. So I think dental implants are playing a huge role in both function, in aesthetics, and also in the overall emotional well-being of our patients.
All right. Well, it looks like that we are out of time, but it's been great talking to you, Dr. Ickert, about just about how we can replace the teeth that we've lost. And on the next episode, we'll be talking about dental implants and everything that we need to know about them. So if you have any questions, please call Dr. Ickert at 605